Of 1,000, out of thousands, one seeks spiritual attainment. Master used to say that he preferred a soul to a crowd, but he loved best a crowd of souls. And in this room we have people who out of thousands, each one has decided to seek God. It's not so common in this world. Most people are searching for more and more things to buy, and more power, and more toys, and more relationships, and more people to shoot. And it's a crazy world out there sometimes. And it's funny because you think it's like little children building a sandcastle by the shore. No matter how elaborate or how beautiful or how large and wide the sandcastle is, still the tide is going to come in and sweep it all away. Nothing is permanent in this world. But that one out of thousands decides to seek something permanent, something that is secure, something that can't be changed, something that is perfect, all loving, all powerful. And it takes courage to find that. I love this chant. If that doesn't invoke courage, I don't know what can. That courage is what we need on the spiritual path. We have to not only talk about God's love and say theoretically, yes, he loves everyone the same. No, we have to feel it. We have to experience it for ourselves. And really, that right there is the meaning of life. That's the purpose of life, is to experience God's love. Not just talk about it, but feel it. And from that experience, share it with everyone. That is perfection. And we have to do that seeking inside. You know, this reading says, strive always to be impersonal, as though whatever happens to you were happening to someone else. If persecution comes, deny the thought, this is happening to me. You know, you can think, what does that mean? Am I denying my feelings? Am I not in touch with reality? What does that really mean? It's nothing like that. Yes, of course you know what you feel. Of course you're aware and integrated. That is the goal of yoga, integration of all body, mind, soul, every part of our personality, union with that divine aspect of ourselves. So it's not talking about denial. It's talking about being centered in the self, no matter what happens. Whenever I think of being centered in the self, I think about this time in India. We were fairly new to India, and we had rented a house for Swami and his staff. It was just a small house, but we had to get a really big generator to cool it enough, to run the air conditioners enough that he could be comfortable, because he was in his 80s at the time. And he'd never done well with heat, even when he was a young man. So we had this big electrical system and generator, and it had a tendency to catch on fire. So the first time that this happened, Swami was in his office. I happened to be working behind him, helping him with something, and he was typing at the computer. He was writing a book. And this young man who was staying with us as one of the monks there, without knocking, without anything, came bursting into Swami's office and shouted, "Fire!" And he was just beside himself. "Fire, fire, you've got to get out of here." And Swami, I'll never forget, he just looked up from the computer, and then he said, "All right, well, let me finish this chapter." Centered in the self, no matter what happens. And he did. He finished what he was doing. It took a couple of minutes, very concentrated, very calm, very centered. And then we proceeded to scoop everything up and move him to a new location. An aside to this is that Dharmadas was teaching a meditation class down the street in another house. And they were practicing meditation. They were meditating. And he heard these footsteps padding up to his chair. Pad, pad, pad. Somebody leaned over and said, "I thought you might want to know your house is on fire." And he said, "Yes, thank you, I do want to know that. Class dismissed." So in his own way, he was very centered, and then he came to deal with the fire. But that's what we need to learn, to stay centered no matter what. And in every circumstance, surrender to God's will. Draw God's active participation in whatever is happening. We spent a few days visiting my mother, doing some projects for her. She's 88. She had lots of projects. And we got on the plane. We went to the airport yesterday, and our plane was late, which meant that our connecting flight we probably wouldn't get. It was very iffy if we would catch our connecting flight to get home in time. And so we were thinking, but Lord, we have to catch this plane. We have responsibilities. Dharmadas said it would be like Russian roulette. Which of the ministers are we going to call and say, "Hi, you're on in just a few hours"? And we had to pray. And I could feel the anxiety coming up of, oh no, what if we miss the plane? What if we have to spend the night in Washington, D.C. and then fly tomorrow, and all the commitments that'll tangle up and all the problems? And I had to consciously just say no. God is in charge. And that's why all these things happen to us. Precisely for that reason, so that we can consciously choose. Are we going to give into the fear and the anxiety and the problem consciousness? Or are we going to say, God's will be done. Let me live with God. Let Him be in charge. I have no control over the planes and where they're going to fly and what they're going to do. God can help. God can do everything. And so our first plane landed. We had a long way to run to get to the gate for the next flight. Even the flight attendants were saying, I don't think you're going to make it. So we sprinted. I was breathing so hard. I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to leave my body, I might as well leave it this way. But we put out every ounce of effort that we could. And the gate was naturally closing. We just had a few minutes to catch this flight. And the gate attendant was watching us coming. You're from Columbus, aren't you? Yeah. It's okay. We're gonna let you in. We were the last ones in, and we came, screeching in onto the plane. And the flight attendant said, how come you guys made it and that other guy didn't make it? And I said, we ran. We gave it everything we had. And that's what that chant is all about. Give it everything you have. Don't qualify your commitment. Don't say, this far I will go, God, but not any farther. Give it all. Give it all to God. That's what He wants. He wants you to depend on Him, to love Him with your whole heart, not hold anything back. And that's, again, the purpose of life. Give it all to Him, love Him, feel Him, experience Him. That's the beauty of this path. It's not all about talking about it. It's about living it. Kriya Yoga is living life with God. And that power that you felt in that chant, that's only a small taste of the energy, of the joy, of the bliss that is our birthright. It's what we were made for. We're just like little kids going through a school, learning and growing, and every run to the airport gate is just another little test. Everything of health, disease, sickness, pain, problems, finances, relationships, all of it. It's all just to help you grow so that you can tune into that beauty, that joy that is yours. Claim it. Go within. Find it. It's there. I'm going to sing a little song for you.
Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dream, though it lead to worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow, once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the longing, all this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Sing with us. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the call still awaits you.
topic of self-transcendence and be ye therefore perfect. This is one of the, and we were talking about this a little bit last week, this is one of the less convenient passages in the Bible, you might say, because, in fact, it came up this week in casual conversation with someone in Ohio that, well, nobody's perfect. And it's just one of those little aphorisms that just creeps into the culture. It's just anywhere you go, you could just hear, well, nobody's perfect after all. And yeah, okay, no person, perhaps, in their personality, in their, physical being is perfect, because this world is a world of relativity. It's a world of duality, plus and minus, positive, negative, etc. But that's not the perfection that Christ is talking about. And it's just interesting, and this chant today, the Swami Ramtirtha's chant, it gives us this, it sort of forces us, if you're going to sing those words, you have to put on a different mentality. You have to say to yourself, well, maybe it's possible. Christ doesn't say that, be ye therefore perfect. He doesn't say that for us to sweep it under the carpet and, stuff it in the closet back, really far behind all the boxes that we don't want to open. He's saying, do that, live that, be that, because that's who you actually are. All the rest of it is the dream. The perfection is the reality. We are the soul. Yes, we have a body. Yes, we have a personality. Yes, we operate in a world of relativity. As Nirmala rightly pointed out, Swami couldn't, in that moment, he could not control the fire that was, consuming the electric panel in the house. And it was really, by the time I arrived there, just to continue the story, it was pretty exciting. Literally and figuratively. The power lines were under the driveway, and they're pretty hefty cables, and all that insulation was burning. It was burning all the way back to the power line. And what they do, since we had a certain amount of experience with this, it happened a couple of times, a little sooner or later, some little barefooted Indian is going to climb that pole, and he will physically disconnect your house from the power line so you don't take down the whole neighborhood, which is, fine. It's sort of impressive to watch a barefooted person climb a pole, with a pair of loppers and, physically disconnect the wires to your house by cutting them. And, and then you suddenly realize, gosh, you know what? We don't have any electricity now for a while here. Anyway, all this black smoke was pouring out of the manholes in the driveway. It was, but, when you live in a masonry house, a house made out of concrete and stone and brick, it doesn't burn down as easily. And it may be subject to earthquakes and things, but burning down, that doesn't happen quite as easily. So the electric panel went up. If that had been a wooden house, well, we might have had a serious problem, because we would have lost about half of it probably. But anyway, it was a memorably amazing moment. Swamiji was, thinking of that affirmation, I live protected by God's infinite light, we don't necessarily think of light as being all that much of a protection. If you're going to go into Arctic conditions, you want perhaps more than light around you. You want a nice heavy coat and a hat and gloves and boots and the whole thing. Swamiji was writing this chapter, and he was not to be dissuaded. When he is in a flow, that flow is the important thing. And so we had to move him out of that house. The power was down, everything was being shut down. It was all bets were off for a little while. Took him down the street a few blocks. Somebody moved out of the room they were in, got him situated in it. We got his computer set up. It was a flurry of activity just to try to keep that flow of inspiration that he felt going. Okay, we got that dealt with. He finished whatever he was working on right that moment. But then we had to have a place for him to stay, and he couldn't stay in that house because it was a huge commotion. So we got him over to a hotel. And then the same thing, you know, our little train went over to the hotel. We rented the room in the hotel, got him situated, got his printers hooked up so he could print what he was writing. We, all of us, have the potential to feel that much flow in our lives that nothing, it literally, whatever outer thing is going on, it sort of bounces off of the light that surrounds us. I'm reminded of a story of St. Clare, Santa Chiara in Italy, and some of us were on a pilgrimage there about 1.5 years ago and went to the place where she lived, the little monastery there where she had her cloister and her nuns stayed there. And, you know, there are lots and lots of stories, lots of miracles associated with St. Francis and quite a few with St. Clare as well. But one of them was an army was approaching, Assisi was approaching that area. And it was not a friendly army. They were not likely to treat people nicely. And her defense, you know, this is a nun, and when you see her body, you know, she looks like she's about 3 feet tall. I mean, really, she's not very big. I imagine she was 4 feet or 4.5 feet, something like that. I mean, very, very small. She walked out of this upstairs door. She opened a door, and she held up the crucifix. That army stopped in its tracks and turned around and went away. Now, why? Why would that stop an army? Because they saw light, because they felt a power, like was in the chant that we were singing, that said, no, you don't come here. You don't bring that kind of energy to a holy place. You don't interrupt the lives of these nuns. And all of us, you know, we think, I know for myself, growing up in the West, there is a sense that well, nobody's perfect. And to adapt or to take hold of the chant, the mentality of the chant, we have to change that mentality and say, well, anyone could be a saint. And this is something in India, this is very subtle, because Indians are no different from anyone else in most human ways. They have their own insecurities, they have their own challenges, they have their own societal pressures that are extreme. I mean, really, really powerful over there. And yet, it's a culture that produces saints. And there is a sense, not overtly expressed, but there is a sense kind of hidden under the surface, in the software of the culture, you could say, that says, my neighbor, I may think he's a nut, but he could be a saint. And if he makes a spiritual commitment, if someone makes a commitment to live a spiritual life, the culture says, oh, he's a saint. You're a saint. I mean, people would walk up to us and say, oh, you're a saint. You know, and it's like, what? You know, you look in the mirror and think, could this be a saint? I don't know. I don't think so. And yet, you have to throw that mentality off and say, God brings his saints everywhere. It's a matter of embracing the light. It's a matter of embracing the perfection of your own being, not the personality, but the light that's trying to move through. Swamiji didn't care about mistakes. He was not bound by the past. He was not bound by anything except Master's will, God's will trying to flow through him. And he lived for that. He breathed for that. That was his only reason for walking the planet, was to somehow be an instrument for that blessing and that light to come through him. And people could feel that. It was one of the things that really touched me in India, is people could assess that in an instant. They could pick that up in a heartbeat. The purpose of this person's life is something different. It's not worldly. It's not about me and mine and my little family or my little reality or my little personal inclinations and desires. It's to share and love and serve God. That is the potential for every one of us. And, the Bhagavad Gita reading paints it in a fairly stark statistical terms. It could be like 1 in a million. Although if you add it up, 1 in a million still means we've got a few thousand saints and masters roaming the world. If you tally out the billions, if you really work the math, there are quite a few around. It's just that 1 in a million, you don't see 1 in a million very often because you're not really around a million people that often. Master, of course, pointed out that our odds are much better in self-realization, so we sort of have that to work with as well. But it's not about the numbers. It's about what do you desire? What motivates your life? Because if it's personal, then it can be taken away from you. And sooner or later it will be taken away from you. But the light can never be taken away from you. We live protected by God's infinite light. That light animates our very being. And when we learn to feel and flow with that light, yes, we can work miracles. And they won't be miracles in the sense that they're mysteriously impossible or whatever. It'll just be the most natural thing in the world. God asks you to do that. God asked Master to raise someone who was dead. So he did. He didn't, wasn't so much of a big issue. That was what was needed. That's what he did. He healed someone. He enlightened someone. Any of those things, he came to show us what we could do, not how impossibly far advanced he was and how impossible it would be for us to follow in that path. But we have to adjust ourselves to the thought that any of us can be a saint, that any of us can achieve that perfection in this lifetime, not off in the distant future. That, I have to say, was one of the things that I struggled with in India, because so often people would preface whatever they were saying by saying, well, in the next lifetime, or well, in another life, well, in the dim, distant future, yes, theoretically I could, possibly, maybe, whatever. No. You hear the chant, or you hear the song that we just sang, Go On Alone, and it's like, no, we're doing this now. We're doing it now, because that's the only time you ever have is now anyway. Do what God gives you to do now, and you will have perfection. It's just, it won't be outward necessarily, because perfection is inward and of the soul, and you will realize what your soul actually is, never bound by the personality. The personality, yes, personalities come, personalities go. Bodies come, bodies go. I love the other Go On Alone song is, truth can never die. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Now, I suppose most of us might think, gosh, if the world disappeared, that could be sort of a problem. It's like I'm sort of used to this world, I kind of get accustomed to the idea that, it's my planet. I sort of walk around and have an experience and et cetera. Well, if it disappeared, that might be, it might interrupt my afternoon tea. But God's perfection is infinitely beyond anything that can color it. And it's our birthright, our blessing, and our destiny to experience that for ourselves.